You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
The American Dream is officially on life support. Thanks to Trump, based on an article by Alex Henderson. Trump promised cheap life. He delivered a Costlier one. The narrow promise. The source article is about a familiar scam in modern American politics. Donald Trump won on inflation anxiety, promised to lower prices on day one, and 1.5 years into his second presidency the squeeze is worse. The reporting lays out the damage plainly enough. Groceries, housing, cars, education, all more expensive, all forcing ordinary people into debt or retreat. Who actually holds power? This story is not about mysterious market forces wandering in from the weather. It is about institutional power. Trump sits at the center of federal executive authority, and he sold voters a promise of relief he did not deliver. That is the political fact that matters. When prices keep climbing and the president who ran on affordability remains in office, the responsibility does not dissolve into abstract inflation as if no one is governing. The article names economists and observers. Fine, but the key question is simpler. Who made the promise, who won power on that promise, and who now benefits from the fog around its failure? The answer is Trump and the political operation that turned material desperation into a campaign slogan. Affordability is discipline. What the piece describes is not just inconvenience, it is social discipline through expense. Food gets pricier, rent eats up as much as 60% of income for an urban family. A 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco sits at $5,200 a month. Car ownership becomes a punishment, not a norm. Even education, the old ladder of mobility, now costs enough to keep meaty and earners trapped between ineligibility for aid and unaffordability of tuition. That is the structure. People are not merely feeling poorer, they are being forced into narrow choices by prices that turn independence into leverage for creditors, landlords, insurers, and institutions that already hold the power. The framing problem. The article is strongest when it shows how thoroughly American life has been priced into submission. It is weaker when it treats that outcome mostly as a mood shift or a national sadness about the American dream. That language softens the conflict. This is not a collective mood disorder. It is a political order in which essential life costs are allowed to rise until survival itself becomes a monthly negotiation. Joel Kotkin's neo-feudal line is not subtle, but the underlying point is sound. The country is being organized around extraction from people who work for a living and can still be squeezed anyway. The story risks sounding like a lament for lost comfort unless it names the class and institutional winners who profit from the squeeze. The electoral lesson. The independents who voted for Trump on inflation were not irrational. They were exploited. They were offered a transactional lie. Hand over power and prices will fall. Instead, they got a president whose central political skill is converting grievance into permission for elite rule. That is why the failure matters beyond a single bad economic cycle. It exposes how easily democratic accountability is sabotaged when leaders can run as saviors for the cost of living and govern as caretakers of the very conditions making life unaffordable. This is what misdirection looks like in practice. A campaign promise aimed at pain, followed by an administration that leaves the pain in place and counts on exhaustion to blur responsibility. The larger pattern. The broader pattern is not just inflation. It is democratic erosion through material insecurity. When housing, food, transportation, and education become structurally out of reach, politics gets easier to manipulate because people are too busy surviving to demand more. Scarcity is not an accident of the system. It is a way the system disciplines the public while preserving power at the top. If this story reveals anything clearly, it is that the American dream is not on life support. It has been turned into a billing category. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternet for today's article. With the automated voice of Marcus, thanks for listening.